Yeah, hi there. These comments are for Rafat. This is Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for the 7-step system to pass the TOEFL IBT. And I'm going over, I think it's your integrated writing practice test number 6. And you've also paid for the additional service to have me go through and edit it, your writing, to give you some ideas on what types of grammatical problems you might be having and how to revise those particular problems. Alright, so if I remember correctly, you read a reading passage which discusses Darwin's theory of evolution. And then you also listened to a lecture, but the lecture was talking about the problems with the theory of evolution. Now this is what's called a point-counterpoint type organization, which means that the reading passage has several ideas about evolution, and then the listening passage has counter ideas to each of these ideas. So the sequencing organization is going to work very well, and that's exactly what you did with this organization. So in your first paragraph you say, in this set of materials, the reading passage, I'm going to use present tense when you're summarizing, gives reasons of life can be existed from non-life as Darwin's theory recorded. On the other hand, the lecture is discussing many reasons to refute, not refuse, all of these concepts. So I would probably say something like this. To make it a little bit more concise here. The reading passage discusses Darwin's theory of evolution, or how life originates from non-life forms. Then you say, on the other hand, the lecture, remember what I was saying a minute ago? Usually the simple present and the simple past are probably the two most common verb tenses used in writing, especially academic writing. So I'm going to use the simple present. On the other hand, the lecture discusses, we already said discusses before, right? So you might say presents many reasons to not refute. The word is not refuse, but the word is to refute all. And it's not just one thing. I would say if you say, how about just say refute this concept. And let's keep it with present. So the reading passage mentions, just say mentions Darwin's theory I would just say here, which suggests that all life is related and descends from common ancestors, or from a common ancestor. The lecture refutes this idea. Then you have, as a genetic aspect, as a failure, what is called evolution. Let me look at, I'm looking at the lecture notes. I'm not quite sure where you're getting this idea. I see where it says, the genetic code in any given living cell provides extremely detailed instructions to that cell. The main thing is if you use the lecture and you use a counterpoint, which is all life is related and descends from a common ancestor, you want to find something in the lecture that says that is not true. So I think the first point in the reading passage, or the actual lecture, says, when the mathematical laws of probability are applied to the known facts of biology, the odds against the incredible organized complexity of our biological world evolving through blind chance plus time are so astronomical in size that, for all practical purposes, evolution is mathematically possible. Then another one says, there is a complete and systematic lack of transitional life forms, missing links, between the various kinds of life in the fossil record. I think that second point is the best idea that refutes what you just said. Refutes this idea by claiming that because there is a lack transitional life forms, or what is called missing links, when scientists compare life forms with the what's called fossil records, so the lecture refutes this idea by claiming that because there is a lack of transitional life forms, or what is called missing links, when scientists compare life forms with the fossil records, life is not all inter. From a common life form. Okay, I think we got it. So that's one idea. Now let's move this out of the way for a minute. So the reading passage mentions Darwin's theory, which suggests that all life is related and descends from a common ancestor. Now that's the point from the reading. Now you need to find a counterpoint from the lecture that refutes that. So the lecture refutes this idea by claiming that because there is a lack of transitional life forms, or what is called missing links, when scientists compare life forms with the fossil records, life is not all interrelated and does not descend from a common ancestor. So then in the reading passage, you say the reading passage are depending on collective creation, such as plants and birds are connected together. For example, random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code. Okay, I see where you're getting that. So according to the lecture, we can't even give a reason to consider which is named as equalization of creation. Okay, let's look at what it says. It says random in the reading passage. Random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code. The beneficial mutations are preserved because they aid survival, a process known as natural selection. Okay, the problem is the counterpoint you're using here is not really the counterpoint that goes with this. You got to match up, the counterpoint needs to match up with the claim being made in the reading passage. When I'm looking in the lecture here, the counterpoint that I see, it says the genetic code in any given living cell provides extremely detailed instructions to that cell concerning the inherited characteristics and attributes, so it will allow only a limited amount of change and variation to occur without inducing sterilization or death. Accordingly, the genetic code will not allow, under any circumstances, the drastic changes and continuous mutations demanded by the theory of evolution. That's what you didn't really put that in there. So you're not matching up here. This is a good example of exactly the kind of integrated practice test that you might see on the TOEFL. Is you have maybe 3 different points made in the reading. You have 3 different counterpoints made in the lecture. So the counterpoint needs to go with each of those claims being made in there. So if we take a look at what you've done here, we might say, in addition, the reading passage maybe we should probably, let's do another paragraph here. We're having a lot of grammatical issues here. So the reading passage how about this? To support the claim of evolution, claims, I want to put that in. So to support the claim of evolution, the reading passage claims I think the idea is complex creatures evolve from more simplistic ancestors naturally over time. How about this? Claims that collective creations such as plants and birds are connected together. That they evolved from more simplistic ancestors over time. In a nutshell, is exactly what they said in the reading passage, so you probably want to use a different word than that. So for example, that's probably good enough. If you say for example or in a nutshell, it's the same thing. So you have as random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code. Now this, because you're quoting directly, claims I'm going to put that in quotes. You're going to get yourself into trouble on the TOEFL. If you're going to quote exactly, from the actual reading passage, you want to put it in quotes. Then they're saying, I think, as random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code, as the reading passage claims, these changes aid in helping the species survive. Excuse me. Okay, let's keep working here. So it does say that in the reading passage. As the reading passage claims, the changes aid in helping the species survive. And then these genetic changes are passed on to the next generation. Now again, you've brought up this idea, a really important idea here, and now you have to find a counterpoint that goes exactly to this, right? This is what you want. I think this is where you're kind of going off the cliff a little bit. Okay, so let's look at what we have so far. In addition, to support the claim of evolution, the reading passage claims that collective creations such as plants and birds are connected together and that they evolved from more simplistic ancestors over time. For example, as random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code, as the reading passage claims, the changes aid in helping the species survive, and then these genetic changes are passed on to the next generation. Now the lecture refutes this. The lecture is basically saying that the genetic code in even living cell it provides detailed instructions to that cell concerning its inherited characteristics and attributes, so it allows only a limited amount of change and variation without inducing sterilization or death. So the genetic code will not allow, under any circumstances, drastic changes and continuous mutation demanded by the theory of evolution. Do you see that? That's really the most important thing. You say we can't give even one reason to consider which it was named as equalization of creation. To me, that's not, the lecture talks about that, but that is not a counterpoint to this idea. So you have to get rid of all that. That doesn't really work very well. So according to the lecture, you would say the drastic changes required by evolution cannot occur since a living cell allows only a limited amount of change without either sterilization or death. That's the counterpoint. That's the counterpoint from the lecture there. The counterpoint is, according to the lecture, the drastic changes required by evolution cannot occur since a living cell allows only a limited amount of change without either causing sterilization or death. That would be the counterpoint to what you just said in there with that reading passage. Now this paragraph, it's already getting pretty fat, so I think we're done with this paragraph. So, all right. The reading passage mentions as the third aspect, I'm going to use a comma here, as the third aspect, I'm going to say that stress is purely naturalistic I don't know, you got is completely, you got double verbs here. We got this verb mentions, we have is completely without a background of facts. Let's look at what you're saying here in the reading passage too, so I can see what you're putting in here. Stress is purely naturalistic, is complete without a background of facts. As mentioned in reading about the genetic code, is it contradict with biological evidence as a lecture demands at new changes. Lastly, the reading was spoken about beneficial mutations are passed to the next generation. I don't know. I think you're having too many language issues. Too many problems are going on. I'm going to have to pretty much get rid of this whole paragraph. But you need to have one more idea in here for sure, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this, and we'll try to find, we need to find one more idea, and that'll probably be good enough in terms of answering this question. So you might say finally, which means you get to our last point. See, there's a lot of ideas. There's too many ideas in the lecture. And there's about 3 or 4 different claims being made in the reading passage, but according to the lecture, there's probably 11 different ideas which contradict the ideas in the reading, but because you only have 20 minutes to write this, you shouldn't try to talk about all of them. You should select maybe 3 key points from the lecture that disagree with 3 key points from the reading. So let's look at one other idea that we can find in here. So let's look at what we have so far. So in this set of materials, the reading passage discusses Darwin's theory of evolution, or how life originates from non-life forms. On the other hand, the lecture presents many reasons to refute this concept. The reading passage mentions Darwin's theory, which suggests that all life is related and descends from a common ancestor. The lecture refutes this idea by claiming that because there is a lack of transitional life forms, or what is called missing links, when scientists compare life forms with the fossil records, life is not all interrelated and does not descend from a common life form. In addition, to support the claim of evolution, how about here, we might say to further support the claim of evolution, because we've already made one claim in that second paragraph. The reading passage claims, we already said claims, didn't we? So let's say argues or asserts. The reading passage asserts that collective creations such as plants and birds are connected together and that they evolved from more simplistic ancestors over time. For example, as random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code, as the reading passage claims, the changes aid in helping the species survive, and then these genetic changes are passed on to the next generation. According to the lecture, the drastic changes required by evolution cannot occur, since a living cell allows only a limited amount of change without either causing sterilization or death. Okay, so we're good. So we just need one more idea. Okay, so let's say so you might say finally the reading passage argues that these genetic changes accumulate in an organism over time, result in an entirely new organism. Maybe not just a different variation of the original. And I think that's kind of what we have to find. We have to find something in the lecture that kind of refutes that idea. Here it is. We found it. It says, evolutionists frequently take the biological evidence proving, this is what it says in the lecture, that living organisms do experience a limited amount of change and variation, and then fallaciously expand such evidence to prove something entirely different and unsupportable by the evidence, namely the alleged existence of unlimited change and mutation in life forms, okay, so then we say conversely, the lecture refutes this claim we already said arguing, right? So how about contending? So what we're trying to do here too, Rafat, is as we're using these verbs in here, we use these verbs to help introduce either the information from the reading or the information from the lecture. And we want to make sure that we're using a variety of those kinds of verbs. For example, we use the word discusses, or we say presents many reasons, or we say mentions, or we say refutes this idea by claiming. Here I'm using the word contending. Contending I guess we should say scientists supporting evolution are using false logic to try to show how small changes in an organism can cause evolve into a completely different type. So they're kind of rejecting that. According to the lecture, there is no evidence to suggest how about to suggest the type limited change that would be needed to generate an entirely different life form or organism, right? I'm trying not to use that word organism too much. And now we look at what we have here. I think we have a lot of information here. We definitely, I think, have provided enough information. There's a lot more than that. And a lot of times my lectures and my reading, I'm giving you too much information, too much that you can actually do in 20 minutes, so you have to kind of be selective. All right, so let's see how we did now. So it says, fine with the reading. Passage argues that the genetic changes that accumulate in an organism over time, I'm going to use plural verb there, result in an entirely new organism, not just a different variation of the original. Conversely, the lecture refutes this claim, contending that the scientists supporting evolution are using false logic to try to show how small changes in an organism can cause an organism to evolve into a completely different kind or type. According to the lecture, there is no evidence to suggest the type of unlimited change that would be needed to generate an entirely different life form. Okay, we're good. Now let's get to your conclusion. To summarize all the materials, you could say, there is no acceptance between the two views, which they were focused in both the reading and the lecture. I'm going to say on which, no, you're having grammatical problems here. I'm going to say on which the lecture and the reading passage focuses. Okay, so let's take a look at it one more time. We got to really look at this thing. This is complicated. In this set of materials, the reading passage discusses Darwin's theory of evolution, or how life originates from non-life forms. On the other hand, the lecture presents many reasons to refute this concept. The reading passage mentions Darwin's theory, which suggests that all life is related and descends from a common ancestor. The lecture refutes this idea by claiming that because there is a lack of transitional life forms, or what is called missing links, when scientists compare life forms with the fossil records, life is not all interrelated and does not descend from a common life form. In addition, to further support the claim of evolution, the reading passage asserts that collective creations such as plants and birds are connected together and that they evolved from more simplistic ancestors over time. For example, as random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code, as the reading passage claims, the changes aid in helping the species survive, and then these genetic changes are passed on to the next generation. According to the lecture, the drastic changes required by evolution cannot occur, since a living cell allows only a limited amount of change without either causing sterilization or death. Finally, the reading passage argues that the genetic changes that accumulate in an organism over time. Let's reduce our adjective clause here. We don't need that. We can just say accumulating, right? Make it a little more, what we call concise. So then let's read it again. Finally, the reading passage argues that the genetic changes accumulating in an organism over time result in an entirely new organism, not just a different variation of the original. Conversely, the lecture refutes this claim, contending that the scientists supporting evolution are using false logic to try to show how these small changes in an organism can cause an organism. We already said organism can cause it. I'm being repetitive, right? Can cause it to evolve into a completely different type. According to the lecture, there's no evidence to suggest the type of unlimited change that would be needed to generate an entirely different life form. To summarize all the materials, there is no acceptance between the two views on which the lecture and the reading passage focus, not focuses, right? Because we're using a plural, need a plural verb there. So there it is. So we got it. Wow, that was a tough beast to tame, wasn't it? Okay, now the question is, how would you score? Now, you just saw all the changes that I made. So if I go into, okay, here, make sure we're on. Okay, so you can see what I see, right? So let's move this a little bit bigger. Okay, let's say 4. Your response is pretty good in selecting the important information from the lecture and in coherently and accurately presenting it in relation to the relevant information in the reading. No. No, 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 no. Says, your essay is characterized as having one or more of the following. Even though your response is somewhat connected to the writing task, it communicates only unclear, global, or even imprecise connections of the points made in the lecture to the points expressed in the reading. Your response has omitted at least one major key point in the lecture. Your response conveys an incomplete, inaccurate, or imprecise connection of the ideas in the lecture to the ideas in the reading passage. What this just says, it kind of describes what you're doing here, but let me look into the 2 range. There are some grammar issues that might apply more. It says your response contains language errors or expressions that make connections that or meaning unclear at key junctures. In fact, a reader who is not already familiar with the lecture or the reading passage would not understand what you were writing about. I'm going to put you at I'm going to say 2.75 out of 4, 18 points out of 30 on this particular speaking test based on what I just read. So you're getting there, but the main thing that I see with what you did or what you didn't do is the actual the point and the counterpoint thing. To me, that's really the biggest issue that you're having right now. Is you have to find out, especially with this type of task. This one, see, here's what you're trying to do. In some of the integrated writing tasks, you're trying to use the same organization for all of the different writing tasks, and you shouldn't do that. What you have to do is read the passage, listen to the lecture, and then consider how you can best organize your ideas. Now, this time, you chose, I think, an effective way to organize your ideas, which means you chose what's called sequencing. Sequencing means you're discussing the reading and the lecture in the same paragraph. But what you didn't do very well is you take this point from the reading passage, but you weren't presenting the counterpoint from the lecture that connected to that idea that you were using in that paragraph. So that's really what you need to do a little bit better on, especially given the fact that 9 times out of 10, even most people say 100% of the time, the information in the lecture will disagree with the information in the reading passage. So you have to find out, first of all, what are the key points being made in the reading passage, and then second of all, how does the lecture disagree with each of those points? And you want to try to organize your integrated writing practice test to show that organization. All right? I hope I've given you some pretty good ideas here. Anyway, it's certainly good to read your writing again. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to reading your essay the next time.